All right, we're picking up the action in race number 3 of the 2014 Intercollegiate Match Racing National Championship. It's Georgetown and University of South Florida in the finals, and it's 1-1 and the first to win 3 races. They have about a minute and 15 to start, and Georgetown is in boat number 3, and South Florida is in boat number 2. Boat number 3, Georgetown, was blue, coming in on port. They did a nice job getting over the top of South Florida, so there was no control in the dial-up. With 1 minute to start, they came into the playground. There's a protest and a green flag, no penalty. Georgetown took the lead at about 2:20 and was leading back and decided better that, thought they were a little early, and gave up the lead, and now they are the pusher. So with 40 seconds to go, it's Georgetown on the right pushing, South Florida on the left leading. We've seen when both boats start on starboard, the leeward boat has been much stronger. We call it a close to leeward start. So we'll see if Nevin Snow from Georgetown remembers. This is exactly the same setup as the race number 2, where he was the winner boat. I was thinking he could have tacked onto port and started on the opposite tack. You get that tack onto port for free if you do it before the gun goes. But with only 8 seconds to go, it's not going to happen again. So once again, I think South Florida has won this start by being close to leeward and forcing the Nevin to tack after the gun. And there goes South Florida matching the tack. Again, a little bit of risk in matching that tack if you end up not being able to live. But I think Georgetown was late to the start. So South Florida had about a length lead coming in, 3/4 of the length coming in. So it was a little easier to match that tack, and they're actually bow forward. So a great job in South Florida getting off the line. Chris Stocky, and did a great job in that start being the lure boat and in complete control of this race. Here goes Nevin Snow bringing his boat around, and Chris Stocky tacking right on top in a very close cover there. Right now, Georgetown has to choose to keep their bow down and build speed, and then tack at speed, or try and tack out when they're down speed. Nevin's chosen to don't get crazy here, keep the boats going fast. It's still a close race. What Nevin wants to avoid happening in this race, which happened last race, is they've got some separation, and Chris Stocky and his team did a much better job of going the right way. But already we're seeing South Florida, all regatta long, has been a little quicker than most everybody else. And once again, they're showing that here. They're just sailing a little higher and faster than Georgetown, and they're opening up a pretty strong lead right off the bat here. So that's to the credit of South Florida and Chris's team, as they got a fine start, probably a little better start, and now they're able to extend their lead by sailing faster and a little bit higher. Georgetown's got their work cut out for it in this series, especially on the starting line. Nevin's got to turn the starting around a little bit and get the upper hand off the line, because South Florida's pretty darn quick. But here they come around the windward mark with a huge lead. They actually hit the windward mark with their spinnaker in their last race, but they were a little more careful this time. And Georgetown is going to round about 6 to 8 lengths behind in a nice puff. There goes Stocky bringing his boat into a jibe on the starboard, and Georgetown jibing right away with him. I think the current is probably getting less strong. The low tide's around 1-ish, and so probably less advantage going downwind to the right over the left. It's probably pretty even. So the interesting thing about what Georgetown did is they have jibed and made it much easier for South Florida to defend their lead, because South Florida is to leeward and ahead. And I think their wind is probably in front of Georgetown, so they're in what we call the power position. I think Georgetown's move here is to jibe and to try and get across the line of South Florida if South Florida doesn't jibe, and then be able to come back a little bit later on in the leg and put their wind shadow on South Florida. Without getting your wind shadow on the other boat, you will not pass them. It's not the kind of day, and here comes their jibe, it's not the kind of day where there's big streaky puffs coming from behind or whatnot. It's filled in, it's pretty solid across the course, a good 7-8 knots right now, very steady. So the only way really for the boat behind to catch up is to get their wind shadow on or near the other boat, forcing the other boat to maybe sail a little higher to keep their wind clear, catch up a little bit that way, etc., etc. So here they come. Georgetown jibe. South Florida matched the jibe, so South Florida again has their wind in front by about 2 lengths, and as they're coming into the gate. So South Florida will take a nice strong lead starting the second lap of race number 3 with a score in the series 1-1. South Florida is through the gate, still putting their spinnaker away, but probably not slowing the boat down too much. Georgetown coming through, taking the same gate mark, which is interesting. So that gate mark must be quite a bit more advantaged than the other. Otherwise, the trailing boat usually takes a split. Any separation you can get when you're behind is gold, because it's the separation that gives you leverage in the event there's any kind of a wind shift in your direction. By taking the same gate mark as Georgetown did, now there is no separation at all happening between the boats. And in fact, you see Georgetown tack, and there goes South Florida. So no leverage gained, and so it makes their job a little bit harder. However, you have to balance that by taking the gate mark that's farther downwind, which is a built-in loss. So you have to be, sometimes the race course doesn't help you if it's not set square to if the wind isn't square to the gate. Nevin Snow is an experienced match racer. He knows it's never over till it's over. Just keep fighting, and the best way to fight is to get out of phase with a leader. Sometimes that results in the leader getting farther ahead, but staying behind and leeward won't work. Unfortunately for Georgetown right now, there's better pressure up where South Florida is. They're going to get quite a big pressure and a shift, but sometimes that's the hand that you're dealt. So right now, South Florida did a good job of just extending into better pressure, and they probably just doubled their lead in that last maneuver there. So they are just sailing away in this race. That's okay. This will bring the series to 2-1 if it ends this way, and it's first to 3. So it's Nevin's team's just got to stay positive. They got to keep fighting hard in this race just to stay in that mode. All right, we're watching Chris Stockey bring the University of South Florida team into the finish of race number 3 to take a 2-1 lead over Georgetown in the finals of the 2014 Intercollegiate Match Racing National Championship. Chris had a better start. He was slightly bow out to leeward off the line. Nevin Snow and Georgetown tacked. Chris matched it. Nevin tacked back onto starboard, and Chris tacked to windward. And on a long starboard tack, boat number 2 from South Florida just sailed higher and faster and just sailed away from Georgetown. It's going to leave Georgetown thinking now, watching Nevin Snow's team come across the line. They got to keep their heads up, and they've got to do a little chatting with their coach to see if coach saw anything, but they need to do 2 things to win this must-win 4th race. Number 1, they need to lead back coming into the start. Somewhere about 1:20, they need to be the leading boat. They need to start close to leeward. It seemed to be a much more powerful start today, and get that early advantage. And then they've just got to solve a little bit of their boat speed issue and figure out how to match the speed of South Florida so they can keep the lead and lead around that first windward mark. Downwind, the Georgetown team is very strong. They both are. But that's Georgetown's goal right now. Get a better start, slightly leeward, I think, and see if they can solve a little bit of their boat speed issue so they can keep the lead. But here we go. Race number 4 coming up. Score is 2-1 with South Florida 1 race away from winning the 2014 Intercollegiate National Match Racing Championship.